Well, I mean, there is some truth, perhaps, to the statement, in that virtualization is one of the key mechanisms for the cloud, and it enables potentially enables the transparent portability of workflow across virtual machines, internally and externally. Right. So so virtualization is a key part of the infrastructure. Of course, if I'm a virtualization vendor, I want people to think that the cloud equals virtualization, so that they see me as the cloud provider of choice. But I think, as I say, I think the message that virtualization is important to the cloud is a true message. But to what extent that is tied to any single provider or product, that's a different story. Yeah, well, and the cloud is very much like GRC was a couple of years ago, where it was so, everybody was talking about it, so vendors rushed to add that label to their product. Right, and sometimes it's just old product with new branding, and because there was such intense financial interest in the cloud during the Great Recession, that providers were very quick to respond to that and say, oh, well, then I should become a cloud provider, because it looks like that's where companies are going to spend their money. So we're starting, we're sort of sorting this out and shaking this out to find out who's real and who's not, who can actually do what they say they can do, and what lessons need to be learned to make that true. So these platform-as-a-service providers like Azure and Force.com are part of the cloud architecture that's moving at a slower rate of maturity. Okay, and I think it's because people understand the software as a service and infrastructure as a service consumption models. We're used to interacting with web applications. We understand what it means to host something with somebody else. The platform-as-a-service offerings, though, mean that you are willing to use development frameworks that live in the cloud to accelerate your development and build on those platforms out there. That concept of building on a platform is well understood in our own environments, but what does it really mean when I go to the cloud? So, for example, if I decided to use Azure to build a .NET application in a test environment, but then at the end of that decided that I wanted to run that in-house, how easy is it to move from Azure to in-house .NET? In theory, it's not that difficult, because you're dealing with the same language and the same framework, but the Azure platform has very specific things built into it because it's a cloud platform, which would probably have to be relinked or recoded in parts of the application. So it's not. So there's this sense that it is like what we do on the ground in terms of platforms, but it is a cloud-related platform thing. It is the place where the vendors achieve their goal of lock-in. That if you go with Force.com, or you go with Azure, or you go with Google, or any of these other platform-as-a-service vendors, they are essentially proprietary stacks, in the same way that if you bought a technology and installed it in your data center, it's also a proprietary stack. So the issue of vendor lock-in doesn't go away. Right, but I think as a concept, it's a really powerful concept, and great, especially for small and mid-sized businesses that don't want to spend capital, up front on infrastructure. It gives them a fantastic way to actually have a development environment and a production environment up and running really quickly. I think for the large enterprise, though, it comes back to this issue of refactoring. Which pieces of my architecture are a good target for platform as a service, and from multiple providers, because I have multiple providers inside. So in a sense, it's the same types of decisions we were making, but it's complicated by the fact that you can be sourced in different ways. Right. So in terms of what's weak within their offerings, I think for the particular languages and use cases that these platform-as-a-service providers support, fine. I think it's great. What the enterprise has to determine, though, is in what scenarios are they appropriate, and are they appropriate only for development, or I want to use them for production as well, and what are the gotchas if I decide to do that. But it's one of the platform as a service area is one that Gartner as a whole is looking at very carefully right now in terms of market studies and looking at the providers and assessing the capabilities, because we are starting to get questions from that about from our clients. Well, it's the same. It's exactly the same as, let's say, in my internal IT environment, I have a stack of supported Java technologies and a stack of supported .NET technologies. And at some point, somebody comes along and says, we don't think that application should be running in .NET anymore. We want to move it to the Java stack. What do you have to do? You have to rewrite it. I mean, we're not at any kind of stage where there is some abstract model of the application that can you push a button and it's generated into .NET or Java. There are some people that would like to get there, but we're just not there. And it brings up another important point, just relative to the cloud, is that there are currently no interoperability standards within the cloud. And so we're talking about at an application level, but even for identity management and other sort of core underlying services that we expect in our environments, there's no inter-out standards out there. There's a lot of momentum right now to get them created, but as of right now, they don't exist. So what I hear from my security and risk and identity and privacy analysts is that the biggest problem with cloud providers is the audit. And whether it is you can audit their environments in the same way that you can your own environments, which of course is essential in some regulatory conditions, right? And if I don't have that auditability within an external provider, I'm not likely to use them. So I think this is a real barrier, and it's that introspection into their environment. I've got another thing that I hear too is types of tests, for example, that we do in our own environments, like intrusion detection or simulated denial of service. All of the things that we push our systems to see how they respond. We have to rely on them doing that at the provider side because we can't do it ourselves. So again, the moral of the story is it's how comfortable are you with indirection? And if indirection saves you money and the risk is manageable, then great. If indirection means that you can't produce an audit for your regulators when they need it with the level of detail that they require, then that's not a relationship I'm going to have. So again, the providers are trying to figure this out. The consumers are trying to determine what their demand is. They're measuring this against their portfolio of assets to say, oh, well, this is an application or this is a set of data that I have these audit requirements on. Therefore, I cannot move to these other providers. So what's essential, I think, here, as I've talked about the portfolio piece of it, is really a cloud reference architecture. Something to say that in my environment, these are acceptable cloud choices. Not providers, but rather from strictly a capability point of view, that these are the types of capabilities that I can either run inside or outside. These are the ones that I must run inside. These are things that I'm okay running entirely outside because they really are commodity. And start to make rational decisions about your environment based on real architecture choices and not just thumb in the wind.